The world saw a simple woman with soil beneath her nails, a quiet soul who found her poetry in petals and roots. For 25 years, I cultivated this perception as carefully as I cultivated my gardens. But when my daughter became engaged to the heir of a dynasty built on old money and older judgments, I decided to let her future in-laws believe their own narrow assumptions. The night they tried to politely, surgically, erase me from her future, I was forced to reveal that the deepest roots and the most unshakable strength are often hidden beneath the most unassuming surface. To my daughter, Chloe, I was not just her mother. I was the earth from which she grew. It was the scent of petrichor, the rain on warm, dry soil, that greeted her when she came home from school. I was the patient, steady hands that showed her how to gently separate the tangled roots of a pot-bound plant, teaching her that with care, even the most constricted things could be set free. I was the voice that lulled her to sleep with stories not of princesses, but of ancient trees and resilient weeds that cracked through concrete. She knew my life as one of deliberate, joyful simplicity. Our home was a sanctuary of overflowing bookshelves and thriving plants, a place where the air was always fresh, and the only things on display were things we genuinely loved. She had no idea that her mother, the woman who happily drove a decade-old station wagon filled with potting soil and pruning shears, was also Dr. Eris Thorne, a name spoken with reverence in the halls of architectural institutes and the hushed, curated spaces of international landscape design symposia. My secret wasn't born of a deceit, but of a hard-won philosophy forged in the kiln of a difficult childhood. I grew up in a small, dusty town where the sky was often the color of bruised metal. My mother, Ilara, was a school janitor. Her hands, chapped and raw from industrial cleaners, would nonetheless cradle my face with a tenderness that felt like a miracle. Our wealth was measured in resilience, not assets. My father was a ghost, a whispered memory of a man who found the responsibility of a family too heavy a burden to carry. We lived in a cramped apartment that always smelled of bleach and boiled potatoes, but my mother, in an act of profound defiance, kept a single windowsill overflowing with geraniums. "See, Eris," she would say, her voice raspy from a long day's work, "even in the smallest space you can make something beautiful grow. You just have to want it enough." It was she who instilled in me the love for growing things. It was our shared language, our escape. While other kids played in the streets, I was at the local library devouring books on botany and design, dreaming of wide-open spaces and grand living architectures. I saw the way people looked at my mother, a mixture of pity and dismissal, and I vowed, with the fierce intensity of a child, that I would never be so easily overlooked. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through college, then graduate school. I waited tables, I sorted mail, and I worked the night shift at a 24-hour copy shop. My solace, my purpose was not found in parties or fleeting friendships, but in the silent, demanding language of plants. I learned that landscapes held narratives of history, of climate, of human need. My doctorate in landscape architecture and ecological design wasn't just a degree. It was a shield I had forged in fire, a suit of armor crafted from knowledge and an unshakable belief that beauty and function were not mutually exclusive. I built my firm, verdant soul from a single, neglected city park project. It was a garbage-strewn, forgotten corner of the city that the council had written off. I saw its potential, the gentle slope that could become an amphitheater, the stubborn patch of clay soil perfect for a specific type of hardy, beautiful sedum. I worked day and night, often alone, my hands blistered and my back aching. That park became my thesis, my calling card. It won an award, then another. A feature in a major magazine led to a commission for a corporate campus, then a private estate, then a museum. Verdant Soul grew, organically and steadily, into an internationally sought-after practice. I designed healing gardens for children's hospitals, where the choice of every plant, the curve of every path, was intended to soothe a terrified child or comfort a grieving parent. I created serene, monumental spaces for national landmarks, spaces that made people feel small, yet connected to something vast. But at home, I was just mom. I shed the title of Dr. Thorne with my work clothes. The success, the accolades, the staggering financial security that allowed me to never again worry about the price of groceries. It was the deep, hidden root system, the complex network that drew sustenance from the world and gave stability to what bloomed above. And above ground, in the sun and the air, I was a simple, beautiful bloom. It was how I stayed grounded, connected to my mother's memory. It was how I taught Chloe to value essence over appearance, integrity over accolade. She knew I had an office job related to gardens, but she pictured me drawing nice pictures for rich people. She had no conception of the scale, the influence, or the seven-figure contracts. Then she brought home Julian Hawthorne. I knew of the Hawthornes, of course. One did not live in this city and remained ignorant of them. They were not merely wealthy, they were an institution, a local royalty. Their name was etched on university libraries, hospital wings, and concert halls. Their wealth was so ancient it had fossilized, turning into a sense of innate, unassailable superiority. Their history was a tapestry of robber barons and shrewd investments, a narrative they had polished into a myth of dignified aristocracy. Julian was pleasant. He was a handsome boy with kind eyes who seemed genuinely smitten with my daughter, but he carried the invisible weight of his name like a heavy, ill-fitting coat. He was constantly smoothing it, adjusting to it, aware of its impression. I saw the subtle, insidious shift in Chloe after she met his family. A new anxiety crept into her demeanor. She began to question her thrift store vintage dresses, her easy laughter, the way she held her fork. She was trying to fit her vibrant wildflower spirit into a pre-cut gilded frame that was never meant to hold her. The dinner invitation to the Hawthorne estate arrived not by email or phone call, but by post, on heavy cream-colored stock that felt like pressed bone. The family crest, a stylized hawk clutching a key, was embossed in gold foil at the top. It felt less like an invitation and more like a summons to court. Julian's phone call beforehand was cordial but layered with unspoken instruction. "My parents are traditional, Dr. Thorne," he'd said, the formality of my title feeling strange on his young tongue. "They're very particular. They're looking forward to, getting a sense of Chloe's background." The pause before background was a canyon of implication. He was warning me. The subtext was clear. Don't embarrass her. Don't embarrass me. The night of the dinner, I stood before my simple wardrobe. I didn't choose my outfit to deceive, but to reveal them. I selected a plain, unadorned linen shift the color of sand, a garment that spoke of comfort and artisanal craft, not high fashion. I paired it with soft, worn leather flats that had molded to the shape of my feet over years. I wore no jewelry save for a simple silver band my mother had worn. I looked like exactly what they expected, the benign, slightly bohemian mother, a harmless, uncomplicated artifact from Chloe's quaint past. The drive to their estate was a journey into another world. The city's vibrant chaos gradually gave way to wider, quieter streets, where the houses were set back from the road behind high walls and mature, manicured trees. The Hawthorne estate was not just a house, it was a compound. The wrought iron gates swung open silently as we approached, as if triggered by some unseen sentry. The house itself was a monument to neoclassical ambition, a vast, Palladian-style structure of pale stone, its symmetry so perfect it felt oppressive. The lawns were of flawless, unbroken emerald sea, the hedges sculpted into severe, geometric shapes. It was nature, dominated and sanitized. Every blade of grass was identical, every shrub identical to its neighbor. It was beautiful in the way a mathematical equation is beautiful, precise, cold, and utterly devoid of soul. It lacked the joyful, chaotic wildness, the surprising burst of a volunteer sunflower, the gentle decay of autumn leaves that characterized a true, living garden. Eleanor Hawthorne herself greeted us at the vast, oaken double door. She was a woman who looked carved from marble and crisp, blindingly white linen. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a chignon so severe it seemed to stretch the skin of her temples. Her smile was a perfect practice curve that involved only her mouth. "Aris," she said, her voice like the delicate chime of a crystal glass. "We're so delighted you could make it. We've heard so much about your charming little garden." Her eyes, a pale, calculating blue, performed a swift, inventorying sweep of my person, from my simple shoes to my unadorned ears, and I saw the conclusion land behind them. No threat. She ushered us into the drawing room, a space so vast and minimally decorated, It felt more like a museum gallery than a home. The ceilings were 20 feet high, adorned with intricate plasterwork. The floor was polished limestone, and the few pieces of furniture were austere, modern designs that looked profoundly uncomfortable. A single, massive abstract painting dominated one wall, a splash of angry color in an otherwise sterile environment. Charles Hawthorne stood by the immense marble fireplace, a patriarch posing for a portrait that no one was painting. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man in a bespoke suit that fit him like a second skin. His handshake was firm and brief, his gaze appraising and distant. "A pleasure," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Julian speaks highly of your daughter." The conversation was a meticulously choreographed dance, and I was the guest who didn't know the steps. A servant moved soundlessly through the room, offering flutes of champagne. Eleanor steered the conversation directly to the wedding, as if it were a business merger. "We've secured the Hawthorne Manor for the reception," she announced as if bestowing a great gift. The Hawthorne Manor was the family's private members-only club, a place so exclusive its very name was a social weapon. It's the only suitable venue, of course. It maintains a certain standard. She glanced at Chloe, who was sitting stiffly on the edge of a silk-upholstered sofa, her champagne flute clutched too tightly in her hand. "We want to ensure everything is perfect for Julian, for the family." They discussed florists, only the best, flown in from the Amsterdam flower auction naturally, and caterers whose names were synonymous with obscene wealth. Their conversation was a litany of brand names and social signifiers, each one dropping into the room with a leaden thud. I remained silent, a quiet observer in the planning of my own daughter's life, sipping my water, my calmness a stark contrast to Chloe's growing tension. Then Eleanor turned her benevolent, predatory gaze to me. "And you, Oris? We've been thinking of your role?" She leaned forward, a gesture meant to convey intimacy, but which felt like a pincer movement. "We know that a single mother, well, these things can be a financial strain. We want you to know that we will be covering all the expenses. Every last detail, we insist." She paused, letting the magnanimity of her offer fill the sterile room, a wave of condescension so thick you could taste it. "All we need from you is to be there, looking lovely. We've even taken the liberty of hiring the wedding planner, the only planner for an event of this caliber, Dr. Eris Thorne." The sound of my own professional name in her mouth, delivered with such smug finality, was a seismic jolt that traveled from the soles of my feet to the crown of my head. For a second, the entire room seemed to tilt on its axis. Chloe, beside me, gasped softly, a tiny strangled sound. Her eyes, wide with a mixture of panic and dawning, furious understanding flew to mine. She knew. She'd seen the sleek black monograph of my work on our coffee table for years. She'd answered the phone sometimes when my assistant David called to discuss the Singapore project. Eleanor mistook our shared, stunned silence for awe. "Yes, I'm sure you haven't heard of her. She's terribly exclusive. Does mostly international work now. Museums, that sort of thing. We were astounded that she had an opening. It's a tremendous coup, really. She'll ensure the event is appropriate. Gravitas." The cold, controlled rage that had been simmering within me, banked by years of discipline and a genuine desire for my daughter's happiness, finally solidified into a clear, sharp, diamond-hard purpose. They weren't just sidelining me. They were actively, systematically erasing me. They were using my own professional identity, my life's work, as the final, elegant tool to cement their complete control over my daughter's future. They were buying my own expertise to sanitize the wedding of my influence, to make it a purely Hawthorne production. I carefully placed my crystal glass of water on a priceless-looking side table. The soft clink it made was small, but in the tense, silent room, it was as startling as a gunshot. The timid, simple gardener they thought they saw vanished. My posture, usually relaxed and fluid, straightened into a column of unwavering authority. I set my shoulders back and lifted my chin. I looked directly at Eleanor, my gaze no longer vague and accommodating, but focused and penetrating. The gaze I used when presenting a controversial design to a skeptical board of directors. "Eleanor," I began, my voice low and steady, devoid of its earlier softness. It was a voice that carried, a voice used to speaking in large rooms and being listened to. That is a fascinating choice. Dr. Thorne, her contract is notoriously specific, I'm told. I'm curious, what was it in her portfolio that resonated with you? Was it the Whispering Glen project at the Pediatric Oncology Center, perhaps? The one designed entirely for sensory therapy for children undergoing treatment? Or the Sands of Time installation in Dubai, which uses native water-reclaiming flora to make a statement about sustainability in the desert? Eleanor blinked, her perfect smile faltering at the corners. She was completely unprepared for a technical or philosophical challenge. Well, her reputation? Of course. Her aesthetic is impeccable. The best people use her. Her aesthetic, I repeated, letting the word hang in the air between us, heavy with new meaning, is fundamentally about context and soul. She believes a space should tell a story, not just display wealth. She often says that the most expensive landscape is a moral failure if it doesn't serve the human spirit that inhabits it. I took a slow, deliberate sip of water, my eyes never leaving hers. In fact, she once terminated a multi-million-dollar contract with a prominent European royal family because they dismissed her head horticulturist as the help. She has a rather inflexible policy about respecting the entire team, from the visionaries to the hands that work the soil. She values them equally. The air in the room grew thick and heavy, almost difficult to breathe. Charles was frowning deeply, his brow furrowed. He sensed the shift in power, the crumbling of his wife's social offensive, but he didn't yet comprehend the scale of the earthquake. Julian looked utterly lost, his gaze darting between his mother and me, a boy caught in a crossfire he didn't understand. "Mom," Chloe whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. This time it wasn't fear or embarrassment I heard, but a fierce, burgeoning pride, a dawning realization of who her mother truly was. I gave her a small, profound smile, a look that held our entire shared history, all the bedtime stories and gardening lessons and quiet conversations. It was a smile that said, "It's all right, watch this." Then I turned my attention back to the hawthorns, my expression settling into one of calm finality. "You see, Eleanor, Charles, there's been a rather significant misunderstanding." I reached not for my phone, a modern and fleeting device, but into the depths of my simple linen bag. I pulled out my personal pebbled leather wallet, worn soft with age. From a discreet slot, I extracted a single, stark white business card. It was elegant and understated, the paper thick and substantial. I leaned forward and placed it on the polished mahogany coffee table between us with a soft, definitive click. The card was pristine. It read in simple, elegant font, Dr. Eris Thorne. Principal and lead designer Verdant Soul International. Below was the address and contact information for my downtown office, the same office Eleanor had likely called with such self-importance, the same office that managed projects on 5 continents. "I am Dr. Thorne," I said, my voice calm but filling the vast, silent room. "You've just hired me to design your son's wedding to my daughter, and after experiencing your hospitality and your values firsthand this evening, I must formally and immediately withdraw my services. My contract, as you would have discovered, has a rather robust morality clause. I don't build beautiful, meaningful things for people who fail to see the beauty and meaning in others." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the sharp, shocked intake of Eleanor's breath. Her face, once a mask of placid superiority, was now a canvas of pure, unvarnished horror. The blood drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking waxen and strangely old. Her hand, which had been resting gracefully on the arm of her chair, began to tremble slightly. Charles's face underwent a similar transformation, his patriarch's confidence crumbling into bewildered shame, his jaw slack with disbelief. Julian stared at the card as if it were a venomous snake coiled on the family heirloom table. You are... This is... impossible," Eleanor stammered, her voice a ragged whisper. She pointed a trembling finger at the card. "This is some kind of joke." "Is it?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "The woman you just patronized, whose charming little garden you so dismissively referenced, is the artist you felt lucky to book. I was going to design Chloe's wedding as my gift, a sanctuary of native wildflowers and flowing natural lines, a reflection of her spirit, not a monument to your lineage. It was going to be my masterpiece. But I don't collaborate with people who use pedigree as a weapon and charity as a tool of control. I've spent my life creating spaces of inclusion and healing. I won't have my work or my daughter's wedding become a stage for your exclusionary vanity. I stood up, my movements graceful and filled with a power that had nothing to do with physical strength. I felt taller than I ever had. I looked at my daughter, my heart swelling with a love so fierce it was almost painful. Chloe, your future is yours to design. Are you ready to leave? Without a moment's hesitation, she stood. She didn't look at Julian or his stricken parents. She walked directly to my side, her head held high, and slipped her hand into mine. Her grip was firm, sure. It was her answer, her declaration of allegiance. It was everything. Together we turned and walked out of that cold, soulless mansion. We didn't hurry. We walked with a measured, dignified pace across the vast limestone foyer, through the oaken door, and out into the cool night air. We didn't look back. The silence we left behind us was more deafening, more damning than any screaming argument could ever have been. The car ride home was conducted in a silence of its own, but this one was not oppressive. It was saturated, electric with unspoken emotion. I drove, my hands steady on the wheel, while Chloe stared out the window at the passing lights of the city. After about 10 minutes, she finally spoke, her voice small and wondrous in the dark. All those times you traveled for consulting work. You were giving a keynote address in Milan, she whispered. It wasn't an accusation. It was a realization. Yes, I said softly. That time you were gone for a month. The big project in the Middle East. That was the Al-Zahra Museum. The one with the floating garden terraces. Yes, sweetheart. She fell silent again, absorbing the scale of it. Then she began to cry. Not tears of sadness, but tears of catharsis, of immense, overwhelming pride. All these years, you never said anything. You let me think you were just Mom. I am just Mom, Chloe, I said, reaching over to squeeze her knee. That's the most important thing I've ever been or ever will be. The rest is just what I do. It doesn't define who I am. I wanted you to learn that lesson before the world could teach you the opposite. When we got home to our warm, cluttered living house, we made tea and sat at the kitchen table surrounded by the gentle rustle of houseplants. We talked for hours. The dam had broken and a torrent of stories flowed out of me. Stories of struggle, of triumph, of the quiet joy of seeing a finished garden filled with people. She asked 1,000 questions and I answered every one. It was a conversation 25 years in the making, and it forged a new, deeper bond between us, one built on full transparency and a shared, awe-filled respect. The aftermath with the Hawthorns was a quiet, seismic revolution. Julian called Chloe the next day. There was a long, painful conversation. He was, it turned out, more like his parents than we had hoped, but there was a kernel of something decent in him. He was torn, confused, and ultimately unable to fully defy the gravitational pull of his family's world. He and Chloe decided with a great deal of sorrow to part ways. It was a clean, sharp break, painful but necessary. She mourned the boy she loved, but she knew she could never marry the institution he represented. We planned the wedding ourselves eventually for a future that was hers to define, but we did design a garden together. We took a neglected corner of a public park, much like the one that had started my career, and we transformed it. We called it the Wildflower Haven. It was a space of winding gravel paths, benches tucked into secluded bowers, and a ride of native flowers that changed with the seasons. It was a place for children to explore, for lovers to stroll, for anyone to find a moment of peace. It was our statement. It was beautiful, it was meaningful, and it was utterly free. I never heard from Eleanor or Charles Hawthorne again. Their silence was their confession, their admission of defeat. Sometimes the most powerful consequences are the silent ones. They are left with their perfect sterile estate and their fractured pride, while I walk through the vibrant, living, imperfectly perfect world I helped create, my hand forever held by my daughter's spirit. They have their legacy of wealth and name, a legacy that now feels, to those who know the story, strangely tarnished and hollow, but a legacy of love, of integrity, of teaching a child to value the substance of her own character above the opinions of others. That is the only inheritance that never depreciates, that cannot be bought or sold. And in the quiet, rich economy of the heart, I am, and have always been, a billionaire. If you felt the power in Eris's story, that moment when quiet strength speaks louder than wealth or status, then you understand the mission of this channel. These stories are about the moments that define us, the quiet victories, the times we find our voice. If this resonated with you, if it reminded you of your own strength or inspired you in some way, then please pay it forward. Like this video to help these powerful stories reach more people. Subscribe to Winds of Thought and ring the notification bell so you never miss our next journey into the human spirit. But most importantly, share your thoughts down in the comments. Tell me what you would have done in Eris's position. What does true strength mean to you? This channel is nothing without this community, without your voices joining this conversation. For now, that's all from me. Remember, the deepest roots are often hidden from view, but they're what allow us to stand tall. Until next time, keep listening to the whispers of your own heart.